Hello, and welcome to the Ask the Industry podcast, episode 113. I'm comedian Simon Caine, and for those of you new to the show, this is the podcast where I interview the most influential people from the worlds of stand-up, comedy, radio, and today, the alternative comedy boom. Arthur Smith is an alternative comedian, the Mayor of Balham, and writer who has been performing in the UK since the late 1970s. We talked about his relationship with the Edinburgh Fringe, what drives him, how he has built his career in several different areas, including little spots on TV shows, hosting his own Radio 4 shows, creating his own West End live shows, and so much more. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. We don't just discuss his process, but we discussed hints and tips from him about how to title shows that make them attention-grabbing at the Edinburgh Festival, the most saturated time of the year for all performance, and so much more. I feel like anyone who has an interest in the alternative comedy boom, who has an interest in comedy and the history of it, will love this episode. So I really hope you enjoy it. If you're new here, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you're old here, please do remember to give us an honest, ideally positive review in iTunes. And either way, please do join the Facebook group. It's called Ask the Industry Podcast, and it's on Facebook, obviously. Before I hit play on the podcast, I just want to say that I have signed up for the Edinburgh Festival and I am currently previewing a show around the country. I won't go on about where and when that's going to be right now, but if you want to take a look in the show notes and have a look and see where I'm going to be previewing and where I'm going to be at the Edinburgh Festival, that would be great. I really appreciate seeing some of your faces at the shows. It's always lovely to have the audience come down and say, "Hey, it's me, I'm the person who tweets you," or "Hi, I'm a regular listener and I love it." So if you could come down to a show, that'd be really appreciated, or the Edinburgh Festival. And if you're not able to come down, if you could just pass on the message to a friend who's in the area, that would be massively, massively appreciated, and I can't thank you enough for the support. But for now, without any more delays, this is Arthur Smith.
Birth name is Brian Arthur John Smith. So Brian is what I'm called by all those closest to me. But when in my day you had to join equity so you could work professionally, and they couldn't take two people with the same name. So when I applied to be Brian Smith, there must already have been a Brian Smith. And then I sent in saying, "Can I be Captain Wanker?" And they wrote back and said no, and I don't know, presumably because there already is. But so then I went for Arthur, which frankly was probably a lot better than if they'd accepted Captain Wanker. It would have worn thin, that joke. Anyway, also they wouldn't have been able to advertise me on anything if the word wanker was out of order. So anyway, then I said Arthur Smith because actually I'd been known at school a bit as Arthur, and in the school magazine I used to write the Arthur Corner, which was a sort of column about God only knows what. So Arthur in a way, and of course Arthur, there are, as you will know, at least three comedians you could name called Arthur. Go on then.
Arthur Smith. Does that count?
Right. No, fair enough. Yeah, all right. I hadn't considered that, but yeah, all right.
Arthur, oh God, hang on.
They're a bit old school.
They're old, yeah, I'm trying to think of names. Oh, now this has turned around. How did it start? Arthur, oh, Jesus. There's someone.
Not Arthur Jesus, all right.
Have you not met Arthur Jesus? He's very funny.
Yeah, but he doesn't count. He's never even got an equity card.
No,
all right, I'll give you one. Arthur Askey.
Arthur Askey, that's a good one.
Arthur Mullard.
Arthur Mullard. Arthur, oh God.
There's another one. I mean, he's all before your time. Arthur English.
I don't know Arthur English.
Yeah, he was...
I'm not going to pretend to know who that is.
No. And, of course, playwrights, Arthur Miller.
But this is the thing.
I think Schopenhauer's called Arthur, isn't he? The philosopher. Anyway, I think we've done enough on Arthur's.
Yeah, well, it's because a lot of people change their name because they had a day job or trying to avoid people Googling them nowadays.
Or if they just wanted a sillier name.
Yeah, exactly. And I wondered if you'd done that. I mean, obviously Google wasn't a thing when you first started.
No, that never crossed my mind. I didn't really care what my name was, to be honest, and considered. But I mean, looking back on it, Arthur is kind of a better name. It's also rather groovy again now, Arthur. But there's lots of little Arthurs wandering around I come across.
Right. So you've never thought about going back to your original name or anything?
No, well, I presume I couldn't. And still be a member of Equity, yeah. But I mean, I often wonder who the Brian Smith was or is. You out there, Brian?
Somewhere in a parallel universe.
Also, Brian is a bit of an embarrassing name in a way.
Why?
Well, see, it's a bit wet, isn't it, Brian? It's like Life of Brian or something. It's like you pick the sort of most pathetic name you can. They did in that. And also, when I was a kid, it was Brian the Snail in the Magic Roundabout was really the only role model I had.
For a Brian. Yeah, there aren't many famous Brian Blessed. He's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Brian Blessed is the most ludicrous creature you could ever meet.
I'd love to
marvellous.
Meet him. I think he's amazing.
Yeah.
He never stays on topic. That's the best bit about him. I mean, we're not, but that's, entertainment factor. But I've been told off stage he's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've met him a couple of times.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, so we were talking a minute ago about playwrights, and obviously you've written plays and you've written comedy shows. And when I Google you, most of the things that come up label you as an alternative comedian.
Yes.
How do you feel about that as a label?
Well, I don't mind. I mean, the whole subject of alternative comedy, it's quite complex. I mean, there's some who say, well, there never was such a thing. But there clearly was a kind of small movement that took in various things and was what it principally was in sort of opposition to the stuff that was everyone knew about, that was on the telly, and the working men's clubs comedians, and because these were guys mostly in suits telling jokes, kind of formal constructs, which could be shared amongst any of them in a way. They mostly, of course, this is the time when Thatcher had just come to power, when I started doing stand-up.
So what year is that? Sorry.
I did my first ever stand gig in 80 or 81, I think.
Okay.
And we were very the opposite of all that. They were Thatcherites, for example. They wore suits and they made racist jokes, and nearly all men. Mind you, it was a bit similar on the alternative comedy. There weren't a huge number of women, although there were. Anyway, whereas we, it was pointedly non-sexist. It was against the Tories. It was a bit, political. It encouraged ludicrous acts that you couldn't possibly really think up. It encouraged. It was a more modern thing, and it was directly in opposition to the regular stand-ups, the sort of Bernard Mannings and all that lot. And then when the young ones came out, that was the first TV thing of that kind of idea. And then the clubs were getting bigger, and there were more clubs opening, and it took on a kind of momentum of its own. And so, I am pleased to be associated with it in a way, because I think it was good that it stopped the race, or at least, it made it unacceptable to go along doing some of the material that was going on. So it had a sort of political dimension that mostly I approve of. It was against racism and against war, and that was the ethos there. I remember when the Falklands was happening. That was an interesting time in Britain, when the Battle of the Falklands, because there were a lot of people, there'd be Brexiteers now who got very, very worked up, and like, we are British and we're, the army and the navy, and it was almost unacceptable to be against it and say, what was the point of this? And the Comedy Store was one of the few places where you could hear that kind of opinion without, getting into a huge shouting match or a fight.
That's really... So was it a case of the comedians were leading, because it sounds like all of the clubs were obviously chasing or moving towards that boom of comedy being the new rock and roll. So as they were trying to chase bigger and bigger venues to do bigger and better shows, they'd obviously have to move with whatever the tastes were.
Yeah.
And so if you started, so say you performed something that was not sexist, not racist or whatever, and it didn't get any laughs, would you just find a club where that worked? Or how would that work for you? Because I'm assuming there were still clubs out there that were like working men's clubs maybe, that was still like factory type comedy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, what was the question?
So were there any places that you couldn't play, and how was it trying to find gigs that would enjoy your comedy?
It was mostly all in London at this point. There weren't many out of London, and they all shared there was a vegetarian restaurant that used to put on shows, and then Jongleurs opened, and that was more open to, as the name suggested, to sort of, higher wire acts and jugglers and things. But all of them had a kind of, there was an agreement you wouldn't do sexist, racist, homophobic material. And it's like people signed up for that. I mean, a lot of it, I think, was decided by Tony Allen, who a lot of people... he's not famous or anything, but he was quite a shaper of the political times then, I remember. Someone called him Lofty Tone, I remember. He was quite a dude, old Tony.
So now when someone gets labelled as an alternative comedian, I feel like that title means something different.
I'm not entirely sure because what it would mean these days is because back when I started, there were relatively few of us alternative comedians. There was, I don't know, 20 or 30 for a bit. That's all. Whereas, of course, now there are hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands of comedians and aspiring comedians and open mic spots, etc., etc. And I think, and good for that. But I think within those thousands, you've got pretty much everything. I mean, I continue to see ludicrous acts and quite hectoring left-wing acts. But on the other hand, you also get more, there's a whole range of other things that wouldn't have been there then. In fact, the rise of the right-wing comic a bit, or the kind of neat shirt and tie comedian, the Jimmy Carr, who, I suppose he's good at what he does, but he, there's no soul in him. I mean, that was part of the thing about comedy then. People began to get a bit confessional, talk about themselves, and it wasn't jokes, it was observation and imagining different things. So, I'm generally quite pleased to be one of the alternative comedians. It doesn't stress me particularly. I mean, you always get a bit defined by your era.
And yeah, I mean, there's certain looks that you associate with certain types of comedians, and I suppose do you have a thing you wear, or like a uniform that you put on when you go on stage?
Yeah, that's a good question, because specifically back then with alternative, I kind of made the point, I'm not going to... Why do you have to put a bloody suit on? So I'd never ever wear a suit. And why do you have to dress up at all? So, I mean, I remember a couple of times going, I'm really just a bit like I am now, in tracksuit bottoms and a string vest kind of thing. That was another small rebellion. But then the suits and ties have come back now, I suppose, and dressing smartly. In fact, you don't really see scruffy comedians, do you? I mean, these days, it depending on what the gig is. If I'm playing, a theatre in Guildford, I'll wear a nice shirt and jacket and trousers. Actually, that is basically my kit: a jacket, trousers, shirt. Although I used to do, and still do occasionally, if you're MCing, I always thought, well, that's an opportunity to come on between an acts in a ludicrous outfit for no reason. So I've got a few of those going back over the years. So I just come on, I'd already been on 3 or 4 times because I was MCing. And then I'd come on in a sort of nylon one-piece dressed as a daisy or something, and easy laugh.
Yeah, I mean, definitely worth trying. I mean, you're only on for 30 seconds before you bring on the next act anyway, so even if they don't
but probably longer than that. When I used to MC, you do longer between. It depends who the MC is, what the gig is. Sometimes
If it's a variety show, you might have more setup or something like that, or more.
Yeah, and if you're Patrick Monaghan, you'll do 45 minutes anyway.
Well, I was going to ask. So when you first started as a comedian, you'd obviously been a street performer for a bit before that.
Yeah, well, I'd been in reviews. I went to the Edinburgh Festival in '77 with my university review, which was pretty much what comedy was at the Fringe then. There weren't any stand-ups. So, yeah, I'd been performing, and I was in a band for a couple of years as well.
Yeah.
So I was used to performing, although I hadn't been making a living out of it. I had other jobs, day jobs, obviously. But when the stand-up thing started, I went for that, and I was in a double act for a bit, and we did a TV series, but eventually, really stand-up, I recognised the stand-up in myself, shall we say?
I was going to ask how long you had a day job for before you went full time.
Yeah, I was teaching English to foreign students in North London, and I think I must have stopped around when I was 30. And in fact, already I was beginning to appear on the television then. I remember once giving my class the homework of, they've got to go and watch me on TV tonight, and I give them a quiz about it next day.
Just to get the numbers up.
But I remember distinctly when I was beginning to earn some money, I'd been, but it was exhausting, and I'm sure all young comedians is still the same, doing a day job and then doing gigs at night. And I remember one night, this was when I was still in the review, because I did that as well, but we went and did a show, and then we were coming out, and there was a review in The Guardian the next day, and I thought, well, if I'm reviewed in The Guardian, perhaps it's time to give up everything except showbiz. And I sort of did. That's when it.
So you just quit your job and went straight to stand-up?
Yeah, pretty much. Because I was earning a bit of a living from the stand-up net by now, and being on telly a bit. So I could afford to finally. And then that was the end of Monday mornings. Because I've never been one who likes getting up early, and I distrust really comedians who like getting up early. I mean, if you're a comedian, you're meant to be up in the early afternoon if you're young. I remember Joe Brandis the other time when breakfast television started. He said, I've been watching breakfast television for years. It's called Pebble Mill at 1. There's an old joke.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question about how long you'd been. It sounds like you got full time, or at least you went full time fairly early after leaving uni. How long after that How long did it take you to feel like you were a comedian? Like, how long did it take you to actually go, I've written a bit here that is something that, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I think it was when I remember an incident because I was also, trying to get stuff on the radio, and there was a program then. It's now the equivalent now would probably be Newsjack. That was essentially the news. It was the HUD news headlines, and it had Roy Hudd in it, and they were open to anyone who wanted to submit material. And I distinctly remember one day standing in a car park in Wimbledon listening to the radio, and at the end it said, and the writers included, and there was about 25 names, and one of them was Brian Smith, as I was then. And that, I frankly, if I won the Nobel Prize tomorrow, I wouldn't be more pleased than I was by that moment. And I thought, I've been paid for writing a joke. So that felt a thing. And I suppose with performance, there wasn't a sort of specific moment. Well, I do remember when I started emceeing at the Hemmingford Arms in Islington, and that became a funny little gig. And the very first time I emceed, coming on, and I started talking, and the mic wasn't working, and someone said, "Why don't you switch it on?" I said, and that was the start of my emceeing career. Although in the end, I got laughs out of my inability to turn the microphone on.
I always think failure's better than winning in stand-up.
Yeah, failure generally is more interesting than winning. I mean, who wants to read about someone who's won everything, having a great time? Fuck off. You want to see about the people who've had more complex times and are doing worse than you. Yeah, well, in stand-up, you adopt a kind of status. So you can come on sort of very feeble and nervous type play, or very quiet, or not really sure if you know what you're talking about. I don't know, John Cairns or someone, or or you can come on saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm here and I know everything." You can play high status, and both are good, but you should play the one that's most appropriate to who you are on stage, which in a way it takes a long time to find out your stage self in a way.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, because a lot of people, I think, get to go, like, whatever they define it, get to go full time as a performer in some capacity, long before they later on in hindsight feel like they were good at it, or that they knew what they were doing with it. And I think I don't think anyone ever really knows what they're doing with this, but I feel like you sort of have a better grasp on it when you feel like you could write a joke for your stage self in a situation about, when you have an idea for a joke.
Yeah.
So that's why I was wondering how long it took you to feel like you had a bit of a grip on who you were on stage.
Well, as a stand-up, it probably... But bear in mind, I'd already done 3 or 4 years, in this review thing. Well, I was on stage by myself occasionally, but it wasn't the same as stand-up, really. So I already had a bit of confidence from that. It probably 3 or 4 years, really, to where I kind of felt comfortable going on. And I'm pleased to say I don't really feel nervous anymore before I go on, which I'm sure there's lots of people who do, and I feel a bit... Apparently John Gielgud used to vomit all the time before he went on. Is that right? If it isn't, don't sue me.
I see people getting nervous before. I don't think it's nerves. I think it's adrenaline. I think you're in that flight or fight, and I think
I don't want to be chatting with lots of people just before I go on.
Oh no.
You want to kind of focus.
Yeah, and you want to be like, I want to hit that line, the first line particularly well.
Yeah.
So it happens. I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in my knowledge of you and my research of you, the two things that have kind of molded your career and pushed you forward is the alternative boom and the Edinburgh Festival.
Yes.
Would that be fair?
That's fair to say. I have measured out my life in Edinburgh festivals.
Yeah.
Because
when did you first go up? When was
1977, and I was in the University of East Anglia Review Company. We were doing a show called Swing Along a Dante, and hang on a moment. I'm just gonna read a poem.
Go on then.
There, I've read the poem. Did you enjoy it? Well, you didn't hear it. I was just reading it to myself. Yes, so I started... I've really done this just so I can sneak out and have a fag while we're having this interview. I'll be honest, all right?
Do you want me to move the mic nearer the door? Or?
Yeah, go on then.
How are we going to do this?
Because I'm not really allowed to have a fag indoors.
Are you not? Okay. Hang on.
Yes, but I'll carry on talking. Yes, I went out with the show in 1977... and we got, it was a 2-hour show, as things were then, more likely. It was like, you had an interval and everything. It was in a little primary school somewhere in Edinburgh. And on the opening night, we had an audience of 3, classically, who was my brother and his wife and another friend. But we went out, we did all the postering and everything. We spent the whole day chasing people and eventually on the last night we sold out, and it was very exhausting but kind of satisfying. But I also thought at the end of that, I don't know if I can be asked to do this. I'm not going to make any money out of this, am I? So for a while I kind of gave it up, but then we went back, and then stand-up came, and I am a natural performer in a sense. If there's a group of 10 people and someone says, we need someone to make a speech, I'll just put my hand up and do it. I maybe not do the washing up or the, other things, but I'm always prepared to make a speech. I'm big on funerals and weddings. I sometimes think I should farm myself out.
Yeah, become a priest or something. That would...
No, just get people to pay me to speak at the funeral.
Fair enough. That's the comedy industry isn't once what it was. So I suppose if you're gonna make some money on the side, I was gonna ask about. So you just said the shows were 2 hours long when you first went.
The very first one was, back in those days. There were only about 60 comedy shows, and they were nearly all university reviews.
That were 2 hours long.
Well, they certainly didn't always. You didn't quite have the sort of rigour of right there an hour as they all are now. which is probably better, to be honest, with so many shows on. We'd have been better off doing an hour, but we didn't realise it at the time. And in the end, we even made a tiny bit of money. So it was, it was enough to go back. And then eventually we got a radio series just around the time I was doing, beginning to stand up. So, I did a lot of different things. And like I say, I was in a band. So, and we did quite a few gigs around town. So I was always a performer. Yeah. And I kind of think I always will be unless I can't stand up or speak.
Well, the thing that I find interesting is a lot of people who started or went to the Edinburgh Festival in, say, the 1980s and 70s and a bit in the 90s were saying that it was changing every year to become more commercialised and become more unrealistic to make money.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yes.
And so I wondered whether that changed the reason you continued to go, whether it was originally just because it was part of the university module and so you were like, I have to go, or...
Well, it was partly that if you've got what I aim to do, or I have aims and sometimes succeeded, is to do a new project every year. And just for me, I mean, you don't have to do it there, but for me, doing it at the Edinburgh Festival is the done thing, and that's what I like to do and also I love the city, and it's a great chance to meet everyone in the world. And anyway, it's too hot in Spain in August and too boring in London.
Yeah.
So, but, of all the projects I've ever done, nearly all of them started their life at the Edinburgh Fringe. That's not, and there's all the other shows. There's the gala shows, the charity gigs, the ones where you suddenly come on in someone's play, the one-offs, the late night one at the Gilded Balloon. There's so great. Stage time is always good to keep you mentally alert.
Well, that's what I find interesting, is you saying that all your projects started in Edinburgh. I think a lot of comedians work all year to do Edinburgh.
That's right. I think it's changed a bit now. I mean, I see people doing previews for their Edinburgh show in kind of February and whatnot. Whereas, I mean, I'm old school. I'm, in some ways, it's you're writing it on the train on the way up.
And I mean, you've got an agent, or you've got several agents, in fact.
Yeah.
And for live work, in particular, you have an agent. I'm wondering whether, because have you been with them for a while, or have they?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if they're used to that pattern, because at the moment, I feel like the way the industry's set up, especially for people who want to kind of move from maybe the live circuit to TV, you work your year, you go to Edinburgh with an idea, you bring in all the producers and the reviewers and all that sort of stuff, and then they either pick you up or they see you for a writing job, or they try and transfer it into some sort of TV series or sitcom, or take your character, or that sort of thing, right? And I'm wondering, like, whether you've ever gone up with a plan like that, or whether you go up with just an idea.
No, I've never really done that. I'm not kind of a businessman in a way. I mean, I do think, well, will an audience like this, obviously, but no, I don't. And I've never had an agent quite like that, to be honest. I wouldn't really want one. I mean, I remember when Addison Cresswell wanted to sign me up when he was starting. Off the curb,
yeah.
And I could see that he probably would. I mean, he made a lot of people successful, but he was quite kind of controlling, and it was like having a manager more than an agent. I've always preferred to sort of drift around and see what happens in a way. And I mean, and occasionally something, suddenly something's unexpectedly a huge success, although equally the thing you thought was really good no one's bothered about. I mean, that's how it was, because I wrote a couple of plays, and then the second one ended up really successful, The Evening with Gary Lineker, which went into the West End, and then for a couple of years and toured around the country, and there was a film of it and blah blah. So that was just a sort of idea I'd had. It never occurred to me that would happen. Well, that was rather nice when it did.
I'm always curious. So how is your year as a performer structured then?
Well, other than Edinburgh, really, I don't. There isn't. That's partly why Edinburgh's good. That is a sort of milestone that I'm liable. Even if I'm not doing a show, I'm probably going to be up there doing other stuff. That's the only real milestone on my yearly mile. But I'm quite haphazard. Any time I like that. Sometimes I've done little tours of stand up, and there are some things that I end up doing regularly. I'm currently being the voiceover on a programme called Money for Nothing on the afternoons on BBC, about a woman who repurposes stuff from the skip into sort of ludicrous armchairs. And so, that I've been doing that for a couple of years, and then, I'm a bit haphazard. I don't have a big plan.
No.
And I never really have.
No. But I feel
there are people I know who, wrote down by 30, I'll have £1 million, be married with 2 children, live in, there are people who write, but I've never been like that. I'm a bit haphazard. Life is too unpredictable.
I feel like you can write down anything.
Yeah.
Go ahead, write.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Write it down, but don't expect. I mean, there are some people who are very like that. I mean, I'm kind of a bit wayward in a sense. In a sense, I'm an alternative comedian because I've always been a little bit, I think, slightly on the edge of things sometimes, rather than sort of bang in the middle.
Yeah, and I suppose being like that also means you're not particularly trying to follow trends or trying to fit in with what an industry might want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm alert to what's going on in the world, sort of. But yeah, I don't tailor what I do really with regard to the industry, as we're calling it.
Yeah. I mean, you've done quite well out of it. I mean, you've had quite a lot of awards from Edinburgh, and in particular, the Lifetime Achievement. And I just wonder what your take on awards is, and whether they've actually improved your career or helped bring in more audience.
Well, An Evening with Gary Lineker, which I just mentioned, was nominated for an Olivier Award in the early 90s, and I got quite excited by that. And I went to the ceremony and everything, and the ceremony was quite boring, and then the award was won by some other show. It had only ever been on once or something, and didn't really have much funny in it. It was for the best comedy, and I thought, well, they shouldn't have won that. Bloody award ceremonies. And really, since then, the only times I've ever been asked to go to an award ceremony is if I was getting paid to present it or something, which I haven't done for a while either. So I really award ceremonies, I just find them ludicrous, really, in a way. And so I don't have my awards framed in gold on things. I'm not really bothered about awards. I don't know. Everyone's want to say a joke. I do. I'm an award-winning comedian, although unfortunately the award was for swimming. I watch awards and I say it's so boring. You have to sit there and wait, and then there's endless things. And you're only really interested in your one anyway. Well, I must say that I'm not one who likes putting on a dinner jacket and mincing around Grosvenor House or something. I'd rather be, walking down the road.
Outside it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, but I wondered if, because there's a lot of misconceptions about awards and what they actually provide you as a performer in terms of prestige and in terms of opportunities. And I wondered if any had improved your career or offered you anything.
I really don't think so. And I interview a lot of comedians on the Comedy Club on Radio 4 Extra. And you always get the little PR bit of blurb. And it's always, in fact, it's no good if you're just an award-winning comedian. That's hopeless. You have to be a multi-award-winning comedian. Or, frankly, you're a bit of a wanker if you've only ever won one. Yeah, I don't really pay any. I suppose if they won an award, someone must have thought they were good. So, fair enough. But I don't take them seriously.
Well, on a long enough timeline, everyone's an award-winning comedian and everyone gets a 5-star. So yeah. I think if you just hang around long enough and you find a reviewer that likes you. It's
cliches, in a sense what comedy should do is, smash cliches, and the PR cliches, after last year's sellout show, you never had a show that wasn't a sellout in Edinburgh, which makes you wonder why they're trying so hard to get you in now. But anyway, after last year's 5-star sellout show, multi-award winning,
it's now more available than they were.
Yeah, it's still trying to get a gig. Yeah. I do, see. And actually, funny enough, before we go to awards, For about 15, 20 years, I used to compare the Hackney Empire New Awards and some others too. But I did that one, which became the what's it awards anyway?
New Comedian of the Year, something.
Yeah. Anyway, it was quite a prestigious one, and they had a lot of heats and seeing the winners of that. I mean, some of them obviously. I could name them, you know them all now, but there's about half of them or a third of them you've never really heard of since. And quite often the one who came third is now, Russell Brand was in it one. All sorts, Eddie Izzard and more or less every comedian you could think of was in that at one time, and most of them didn't win. So it's quite clear that winning an award doesn't really amount to much.
No. And you were talking about your Radio 4 show there. And I just wondered, because I got told that you got it after the Gary Lineker play, like they got a sort of sprungboard you to that.
Oh, hello, this is my wife coming in. Hello, darling, this is Simon. No, that's all right, fair enough.
Am I not being recorded, am I?
It is recording, but I can pause it if you want to.
Pause it, yeah.
If you want to pause it, I'll stop it there.
But yeah, Gary Delaney, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, I don't do that. But the first show was called Buddhism and Cats. Second show was called Laughter is the Best Placebo, which is kind of the closest I've come to a joke at that point, as in as in the title, not in.
But they're interesting titles. They're better than caning it. Or
I don't know. I always find titling shows a really hard part to do.
Yeah, I agree. And you never quite know. Funny enough, with an evening with Gary Lineker, we had no title for it, but the producer said that. And initially, we looked like that, we could have been sued by Gary Lineker for suggesting that he was coming to do a show.
Yeah. I mean, I've got an idea for a show that I still don't know what to do with because I like I said, I love murders and conspiracy, all that sort of stuff. So I want to do one called Simon Caine Knows Who Shot JFK. And do it, like as a conspiracy theorist who thinks he knows.
Oh yeah, do you know Carrie Marks?
I do know Carrie. Yeah. Is he into his conspiracy theories?
That's Carrie Marks.
Oh, Carrie Marks. Sorry, I don't know Carrie.
His ex-wife.
Oh, I didn't know.
She did a show called Bad, which is sort of all about conspiracy.
Is Carrie the male's wife's name Carrie as well?
Carrie.
I'm sorry, I've got confused.
I know it is confused. Carrie and Carrie.
Yeah. Okay. So no, I don't know her. No.
Anyway, but she did a show called Bad, and she's quite big on conspiracy theory stuff and inventing her own. Yeah, I find them. Are we on? Are we recording?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I hit record. Sorry.
No, I don't mind.
When you picked up the mic, I thought, we've started. We don't have.
No, it's fine. I just want to ask about you a bit.
That's all right.
I'll
edit me out.
She did a conspiracy show and has another one possibly on the thing. Yeah, I'm quite fascinated. They seem to be much more prevalent than they used to be. And I wondered, presumably, is there a sort of conspiracy theory conference? Where you go and there's a table there with Kennedy, and you've got Liz.
Kennedy won't be there. If Kennedy was there, that'd be a fucking
great. Kennedy, but the Kennedy conspiracy, the 9/11ers, the flat earthers. Are they all mates or do they hate each other?
If there is, I want to go to it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
No, I don't think there is. I don't think that it's as segmented as that. If I'm honest, like from my limited internet, I think the reason it's more prevalent is because there's more of it, more accessibility to it on the internet. Before the internet, I can imagine you would have had to go and meet with someone.
Yeah.
And then it's really because imagine I've come around just to hang out. And I have to somehow because I don't know if you're into it or not. So I have to somehow go, so JFK.
Yeah.
See. But whereas if you're on the internet,
I'm reminded of one of the most strange dates I ever had.
Oh God! Okay.
Years ago, I'd met this woman briefly at a party, and I quite fancied her, and she was up for it. So she rang. So we agreed to meet round at her place in Brixton, and I got there, and she was there, and as was another man who was clearly completely in love with her. And she treated like really shit. And he just sort of sat there like a lapdog, and we chatted, and I thought, well, and then I said, should we put some music on? And she put on her answer phone messages. That was a bit strange. And anyway, I thought, well, this is silly. So I sort of made it as I was going to leave, at which point she dismissed the lapdog man. And then, so we're chatting, and she told me that she'd been abducted by aliens and taken into space where she'd had sex with a lot of aliens. And it's quite hard to know what to say to someone when they say that, when they clearly really mean it.
Why? Okay, well, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but I think there's probably such thing as another life form, but I don't know if I believe necessarily they're picking people up and, you know, abducting them and
I mean, I'm open to the idea that we're not alone in the universe. Blimey, it's a big place. No, I don't think they're sending in people to pick up. People to take them off to have sex with them, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you are listening to this...
Certainly it's never happened to me.
Yeah, if you are an alien and you are listening to this, we've got enough people and performers...
They wouldn't fancy me anyway, I don't think. Mind you, of course, aliens, it's true. Who knows what they fancy?
Could be into anything, man. They might be after your wisdom. Like, they might look at you and go, oh, he knows a lot.
Yeah, but they must know a fair bit if they manage to get to Earth. I mean, we've never got to the round of their place, have we?
Not yet, no. I mean, Elon Musk recently sent his camera up to have a little look.
Yeah.
That's pretty... How do you title shows then? Like, what's your... Do you have like Because if you... Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but you said that you start the idea for Edinburgh when you're in Edinburgh, so I presume when you have to register the show, you have even less of an idea than most...
Quite often. That's quite often the case, though. I sometimes know what kind of show it's going to be, so... I did a show in the 80s, I think, which I called Arthur Smith Sings Andy Williams. And I called it that with having no idea what the actual show was going to be. But then the show, in fact, in the end, I did sing a little bit of Andy. It's a long story, but the show was successful. And then I conceived I'd do some more Arthur Smith Sings. So then... Because it sounds like... And then I did Arthur Smith Sings Leonard Cohen, which I thought promised the grimmest evening of entertainment imaginable. You know, it was a kind of anti-title.
Yeah.
But in the end, I did end up singing some Leonard Cohen songs, which I've always loved anyway, and it sort of became something different. But yeah, I agree. I'm not very good at titles. And it's because it's difficult. It's hard to know what a successful title is anyway. I mean, you could have a great title and a shit show, or the other way round. It's difficult to discern what is a successful title. I suppose something that grabs you and tells you roughly what it is. But, you know, that's a wide bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I try and make it as eye-catching as possible, but I feel like, you know, the problem is when you sit down and like think, oh, that's a great title, and then you look in the Edinburgh programme, you go, oh, so many shows, it's not going to...
Well, my last show was about my father, which I did in Edinburgh, and it's called Sid, which was his name, S-Y-D, and that's just what it's called. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a good title or not, because it's like, hey, what's this? I mean... And it's not particularly memorable in as far as except it's a name. It's got a Y in it. It's 3 letters. I don't know. I don't know about titles. I agree.
Do you think so? When people are looking you up or know you from places, do you think people are coming because they've seen you before, because they've heard you on Radio 4? Where is your audience being picked up from?
Yeah, well, I think Radio 4, for example, definitely. And I do a joke where I say at the beginning, I say you might know me from and. When I was on Grumpy Old Men, that got quite a lot of attention. So I do a joke about that, and then I say, maybe some of you know me from Radio 4. And I say, to those who do not listen to Radio 4, may I say, in the end, you will. And I mean, yeah, my audience tends to be about my age, a bit Radio 4-y. I mean, I get some younger people in sometimes, but you know, you have to accept your audience ages with you a bit. Yeah, so they'd know me from that, and you know, I kind of been around on and off for years, I suppose.
Did you want the Radio 4 show when you first got it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Don't you want to be on Radio 4?
No, but I'm just wondering, because it was a springboarded thing from the Gary Lineker show. I didn't know whether it was an ambition or whether it was just a nice option. Or
well, there are certain things that I have an ambition. It was my ambition to be on Book of the Week on Radio 4. So when that was really good. Well, obviously, I mean, in a way, it's partly to do with money. You want to be able to make some money out of what you're doing. Not that you get a lot on Radio 4, but it gets you known a bit. So
yeah, definitely.
And also, I like radio because words really is my métier. I'm not really a physical comic, or I'm not much of a dancer. And let's be honest, I'm not the prettiest thing to look at. So
there's a lot of aliens listening to this, objecting to everything you're saying right now.
Yeah, well, they'll be here soon, no doubt. Yeah, that's how we'll end this, with the aliens.
The aliens
arriving,
just
right?
arriving. Yeah. That's a good plan. I mean, you're on social media.
I'm on Twitter. Yeah, I don't really do Facebook or Instagram. I've got a joke around Instagram. It's what we used to call a really efficient drug dealer.
But I just wonder what your relationship's like with social media, because it sounds like you're very specific about what you're on. And
yeah, I resist looking at it all the time. Let's put it like that. And I'm very aware of how many people you see just sitting there gazing at this small metallic rectangle. And I do find it slightly disconcerting. And of course, as we know, people get very worked up on it. And in a way, I'm always amazed at the existence of it. If I'd said to, someone, if you'd said to me 30 years ago, oh yeah, soon you'll be able to type a little sentence on a thing and everyone in the world will be able to read it immediately. And you think, blimey. I don't think we've quite understood the change that it's brought, social media. I don't really, but I'm a bit suspicious of it, I must say. Funny enough, I lost my phone at Malaga Airport about a week ago, and which of course initially was extremely annoying and inconveniencing me. But after a couple of days, I was quite enjoying the pesky thing not nagging at me to look at it all the time. And you do wonder about people's attention span and the way kind of democracy could end up being undermined by it. I mean, it's a big thing, and that we don't really know fully how it's going to go or what its effects will be.
No.
And, we'll all be artificial intelligence soon anyway. You probably are already, aren't you?
I'm an alien in a suit, waiting for you to realise this is a ruse to hit on you. No, I know what you mean. I always worry about it. A lot of writing work I get is writing for people and brands for their Twitter or Facebook and stuff. So I'm part of the problem in that I need people to look at it. So I get paid.
I know. I mean, you can't help get to my age and be a bit nostalgic for things like, books and newspapers and just sitting in the garden looking at the sky. These things are sort of disappearing, I suppose. Actually, books aren't there. People still buy them, don't they?
Yeah. Few and far between, but still do. Not mine, but they do.
Oh, have you got a book?
I've got a book, yeah. I've got
What's
two.
That? Two?
I've written 2 how-to guidebooks. One for The Guardian, and I did a self-published one. And I want to write a comedy one next, because as with all my projects...
What were the how-tos about?
The first one was called How to Find a Job Using Twitter.
Yeah.
And it was how to find a job using Twitter. Because at the time I was finding most of my work through that. And I worked for The Guardian for a bit, and they said, oh, would you like to write a book on it? And I said, well, actually, I've already written one. I just never bothered sending it off to anyone. And then they published it. And it was probably the easiest publishing thing I've ever... I have a friend of mine who's a literary agent.
I've already written it. Oh, yeah, here it is.
Yeah. Literally, he got made in about 8 months.
You already ever get one of them in your life?
Yes.
Well, I've got one like that, where it's just all comes together really easily.
Ridiculously so.
Whereas, so often you got an idea for something and then it goes around all sorts of different young men in jackets from Cambridge and then it disappears down a hole.
Yeah, it definitely set me up for a show. So I didn't they took a lot of control over it. And then I self-published a book called How to Make a Living by Working for Free, and it was all about, and I interviewed people like Richard Herring and a lot of people who make a lot of free content for the internet and then make their money another way by the audience supporting them. So it was sort of a how-to guide based on how they've done it.
So how much money do you make out of this podcast then?
Not a lot. I make negative about £80 or £100 on it every episode, really.
Yeah.
So I get about £30 donations from it. And then I think that the petrol here probably cost me more.
I'll give you a quid if you like.
Oh no, it's fine. Not asking for money. No, you don't do a podcast. You've never thought about doing?
No, I've considered it. I have considered it, and I.
But you've got Radio 4. You don't need this.
Yeah, I do crap. Radio 4 Extra, in which I interview lots of people all the time anyway, which is interesting. And I do, frankly, all the arranging of it, I'm not good at bureaucracy.
You book your own acts kind of thing on it.
Well, I don't know. That's what you do, isn't it? So you end up having to be asked friends to come and work for nothing, effectively.
Yeah.
Which, I can't really be asked. If you've had the right subject, I mean, I think there are specific subjects that might interest me. And I've always quite fancied doing a kind of walking one, where you just go walking and also have bits of it that are just walking through a wood, slow radio, as they call it on Radio 4.
Do you know Tony Law?
Yeah.
He does something like Will Wolfie Get It Back or something, where he takes his dog to a wood and he throws a stick, and then he records the video to see if the dog will go and get it. And it's just like 10-15 second like things of him just taking the dog out.
Well, Tony Law's a bit of a one-off, you got to say. Yeah. He's a ridiculous creature.
Yeah.
And very talented.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think you were saying it in a negative way at all. No, totally. I also wondered if the two intersected, or if social media and Radio 4 intersected in the sense that a lot of people tweet about shows and talk about them, and I wondered if you search for your own shows or if you see what people are saying and whether that impacts.
Well, I do a little bit, but I don't. By and large, it's people being pleasant, and I'm pleased to say I don't get trolled a great deal, which a lot of people, especially women, do on the internet, which is disagreeable to say the least. I read tweets sometimes when I'm doing an interview on 4 Extra, and if I'm in loose ends or something, and if I'm doing gigs, I suppose I do kind of advertising via Twitter a bit. I mean, I'm never quite sure if it's that effective or not. Is it? You probably know more than me, Simon.
Well, I find that people come to my shows from it, but it's taken me a few years. I mean, like I said, I've been doing comedy nearly 9 years, and I've done 5 fringes and only 3 solo shows. So I haven't given them enough content, I don't think, to be that committed. But people do come down from it and tell me, "Oh, I really like your tweets," or I really like your podcast, or something like that. So it's a little bit from here and a little bit from there. Yeah, and with any luck, it all.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like Twitter in a way because you can kind of try out a gag in a way on Twitter.
But I always find some stuff works written down and some stuff doesn't work written out loud.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we know that. Yeah.
And I suppose also with your poetry, you can try that out a bit more on Twitter as well, where you can.
Yeah, I tend not to put poems on Twitter, but perhaps I should. Yeah. I mean, I'm not very efficient at all these, frankly, social media. I don't, all the apps, and I get pissed off with the phone with its endless apps and Snapchats and WhatsApps and fucking twats. You asked a question, I'll be back by the time you've finished the end of the question.
Okay. For the benefit of the listener, he's going to the door again to have another cigarette. I've sort of cut one cigarette out, so I'm going to carry on and
that's right. Now I've got the microphone back and I'm smoking my fag out the back.
Okay, cool. You're very well known within the comedy industry and on the circuit, and obviously you have a dent within the industry in the sense that you've been on some TV shows, you obviously have done your own TV, and you've done your own radio. Do you ever consider yourself as famous?
Well, I'm slightly famous. I'm a tiny bit famous. People say, I probably get people stop me, once every couple of days. I'm stopped by someone and they say hello because they've recognised me, which I find quite an agreeable degree of fame, because I really feel sorry for people who are so famous they can't really walk out the front door. It must be awful without people kind of traipsing after them, and I've never really sought that.
Do you ever get envious of friends of yours who are sort of...
Well, I've resisted that over the years because, as we know, bitter comedians, there's quite a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
People who feel that they weren't given the proper chance, or their series got cancelled, or why is that bastard earning all that money in those big shows and he's not as good as me, or and there's a lot of that, and I've felt twinges of that over the years, but I've managed to resist it. What the hell? Let them have their day. I'm not going to go around. A lot of people hate Michael McIntyre, don't they? But it's essentially because they're jealous of him.
It's the thing with McIntyre in particular. I think he's just an easy target now.
Yeah.
I don't hate him. It's not. I understand why he does so well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
However, I don't I think if he had a different agent, I don't think he would necessarily be fronting as many shows, and he wouldn't be as prevalent.
Oh, there's no doubt that who your agent is in comedy is actually, it's quite distressing. You know, like you'll have a sort of chat show where the chat show host is from Avalon, and lo and behold, all the guests are from Avalon as well. Or, you know, and you think, well, that's not right, really. But I suppose, you know, so but I remember when those big agencies started coming up, because initially there weren't any acts, there was no money in it.
Mm.
I remember when I first came across PR people. I'd never really heard of PR. I thought it was like, I'm in PR, meant had some kind of illness. And I was always initially a bit, so your job is to just make up lies, whatever you think really about something. But, you know, you have to accept these things. And actually, I have a PR person. Funny enough, I've got a PR person said to me in Edinburgh this year, an excellent line. It was Buzz Aldrin, touch my arse. Which I
great show title.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it actually occurred to me to be an interesting thing. I'm sure, especially PR women, must have nearly hundreds of stories of males being disagreeable, to say the least. And Buzz Aldrin, touch my arse is a good title. Of course, you'd end up probably getting sued. By Buzz Aldrin, as if you keep this in, you will now do. Because probably he didn't touch her ass, all right, let's just say that, or I don't know. But he probably did, you know.
I'm not getting involved at all. I'm just.
I wish I'd started on this business.
No. I'm just
You're
saying.
You're the one who's getting sued, not me.
I'm just saying. Well, I'll bleep it out. I'll be like beep beep. It touched my asse. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
I wondered whether what your perception of that is, and also because you were in the cult show Red Dwarf. Oh, actually, sorry. I've just spoken to Doug about this, and he hates it being called a cult show. Like, he's not a fan. Like, he thinks Doug Naylor. Yeah. We had a whole discussion about whether it was a cult show, because he said it did good enough numbers that it should be a hit, but because of the way that the sort of, I wouldn't say Trekkies, but the dwarfers of the Trek, that sort of thing. Because of that element of it, people think it's a cult kind show, and so I imagine you being specifically on shows like that have helped you have this sort of culty mystique around you.
Well, there's no doubt that I mean, I don't know how you define a cult show, but there's no doubt that there are lots of people who are quite obsessed with Red Dwarf in a way that other shows people liked, but maybe didn't get quite so kind of caught up in it all, which is a tribute to what an original show it was. But yes, there's no doubt. I quite often come across a dwarfie who knows about my episode, because it was the backwards episode, and I was playing a part where all my words were going to be run backwards. So I said to Rob and Doug, the writers, well, it doesn't really matter what I say, do I? Does it? So, because, when it goes out, you won't be able to understand it. So I came on and said, I did a bit of swearing and said, this is bloody stupid. I bet some twats run this backwards now to listen to what I'm really saying. And of course they have over the years. And so, and I quite like being a little tiny part of the Red Dwarf story. Funny enough, I auditioned for that. I was asked at one point, they were auditioning me to play the part that, Crichton.
Robert
Llewellyn.
Yeah.
And, no, I wasn't asked to. He got the job rather than me, and probably rightly so. And I'm not sure if I wouldn't have wanted it anyway, because poor old Robert used to have to spend he has to get in 4 hours early for all the prosthetics.
Well, I spoke to Phil Jupitus, and I remember he said to me that he wouldn't have done Never Mind the Buzzcocks if he'd known how often they were going to get repeated now, because he says that people think I'm on the telly all the time, and I'm not. I wish, he's like, I wish I was getting more telly work, but this because they've got 90 episodes or something, and they just put them on Dave all the time, and so people sort of think I'm only doing like the same 5 jokes.
Well, in the old days, you used to get repeat fees. In fact, Red Dwarf, I think I still get like £2.30 occasionally. And in fact, I'll tell you what I got the other day. I don't even remember doing it, but I think I must have written a joke for Hale and Pace, which you may not even remember, Simon. But
I know of it.
Yeah, but
not that.
And
young.
I got paid through the sale of it or something to Australia 6p. I got a check for 6p.
It's not worth the money it's printed on.
Through ITV or whatever it was.
Wow.
So but you don't get repeat fees anymore. It's buyouts, they say.
Yeah.
Because I suppose there's so much media and so many channels. They couldn't afford to do it.
No. How did we were talking about agents a minute ago. How did you find your agent? What was the process for discovering the one that worked for you?
That's a good question. It was someone I kind of met up in Edinburgh who was starting an agency, the first one, and then I was offered to go with Up the Creek and probably Avalon if I wanted, but I always preferred an agent. I've got a very respectable agent. I think they've got Graham Norton and whatnot. But I never really ask them to do much. I'm thinking I probably should a bit more. I like them to just sort of negotiate a fee and be nice to me and get their accountants to do it all.
No,
I've never had an offshore account or anything. I've got these really decent, honest accountants.
You've just got shoe boxes of money under
I've got £100,000 under my bed.
Yeah, of course. And a gun. Yeah. No.
Oh yeah, the conspiracies. Oh no, the aliens. That's where. Because how much longer have we got on this, Simon? Because there's a strange sort of atmosphere out there. Anyway, but let's carry on for a bit. It's as though there might be, I don't know, aliens
stuff in the sky.
Something. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I always find it interesting how people meet their agents or how they come to pick the agent they end up with, because obviously, like you said, it's such an important part of your career and it's such an integral driving force to help you achieve.
Well, I think when people start, they get anyone who's prepared to be their agent. Yeah. And then I think that's how I started. But then one of the people with the agency I got to know quite well, and she started her own agency, and then I went to that and blah blah. But I'm afraid I have no interesting stories on agents.
Okay. Fair enough. It's just, I went to your website and you have 5, so I figured there's got to be some story there.
Well, it's a bit of a joke, because I've got a literary agent, a voiceover agent, and a kind of performer's agent, and then there's at least one other that seems to book me for gigs, and then I used to have a news agent, but they've closed down and turned into the Co-op.
Right.
And I had a travel agent. I just wanted as many agents as possible. Detergent. No, I'm trying to think of more agent words. No, leave it.
Secret agent.
Secret agent.
Obviously, they cut the aliens when they come in. You said it's quite agreeable for you on social media and online and stuff, but I assume you get a modicum of hate at certain points because everyone kind of does. How do you deal with like sort of trolls and hecklers and hate online?
I ignore them mainly.
There's a block button.
Yeah, I mean, if you start getting involved in arguments online, I see people do it all the time, and you think, oh, don't bother. It's just you're just both going to get worked up into a lather. But I'm glad to say, I mean, I've never had sort of death threats or anything like that.
No, and it's.
I mean, sometimes I've had people saying you're useless, but I'm like, fair enough. You know what they say about it's like reviews. A bad review should ruin your breakfast, but not your lunch. I try and take that line. Although when I was younger, I used to get very annoyed by bad reviews.
Yeah, I can see. I suppose you think it means more than it does, and in hindsight now, it means less. Yeah,
it's just one person's opinion. There was one year in Edinburgh where I got the woman who reviewed me, I ended up sleeping with that night. So I was very interested to see. Then I got a really good review.
I was going to say, did she review the sex or the amazing?
I know, well, that's what I wondered. Well, I thought, I obviously it was all right because I got a very favourable review.
Did she mention it in the review, or
no?
Was she professional about it?
Yeah, no, it was a fairly straightforward review. Unlike the one that I wrote for Malcolm Hardy, which was for his show.
I thought you were going to say you slept with Malcolm Hardy.
Well, I probably did, but everyone did. But but Malcolm famously managed to find out how to post a review himself, and so he got me to review his show as a 5-star, the greatest thing I've ever seen. That was a good gag.
How do you gauge success then within a show? Like let's take this most recent show. What was the target for it? Obviously, monetary comes into it with Edinburgh, but
I wanted to get good crowds, and I did. I suppose you want to get good reviews, and mostly I did. But really, it's my own. You get the audience, the reaction of the audience, and I felt it felt like it had a kind of beating heart, the show, and if a show's got that, then you're all right. Because I'd done one a couple of years before that called Mindlessness, a Beginner's Guide, which was a sort of parody of kind of all the mindfulness and stuff. That I knew after I'd done it was all right, and there were some good bits, but I kind of knew it hadn't really landed. And I think it's something you sense from doing the show a lot and seeing the audience, and and obviously some shows like the Evening with Gary Lineker one, bang from the word go, that was the only one I've ever come across that just never had any problems. It went really well on the first preview. All the actors remembered their lines. It got great reviews. It went into the West End. It was like it's the only show I've ever had that seemed to require no parenting. It was just it just did its own thing. Mostly though, yeah. And it's a long show. You have to do a lot of rewrites and have you hit this right? I mean, it's a great process in a way, and it's therapeutic. It can be. I did a version of Hamlet in Edinburgh in the mid-90s, and it was partly because I was very depressed at the time, and I was interested in Hamlet as the first ever depressive character on the stage, and actually doing the show, there's no doubt, made me feel better about the sort of misery I was in, and I think that's one of the great things about doing comedy. There's not many feelings better than after you've just come off stage and done really well and feel pleased with yourself and the audience liked it. It's a wonderful feeling.
Oh, completely. Yeah. I've got a theory that everyone has one amazing gig in their first 5, and then is always chasing that.
That's that's quite surprisingly. Quite often it's the very first one. I remember a couple of comedians who did brilliantly first go, and then they died on their arse 3 later or something. But if you've never died on your arse, you're not a comedian, are you?
No, I always find that really interesting, because I talk to people and like you see them on Facebook or whatever, and they always are like, "Oh, I smashed it again tonight," and you're like, you can't be smashing every gig. It's just an impulse, unless you're literally doing it to the same. Well, then that wouldn't work either. I think you need a level of self-awareness to do this job.
I agree.
That means when it went badly and why, and like you can work out why.
Yeah, well, you can't always. Sometimes you just sort of, I can think, well, not often, but there's some lines I've got that will always get a laugh, and then suddenly one day they won't, even though you've delivered it the same, or You never really know. Every audience is slightly its own creature.
I mean, you're as you said, words are your thing, and like you do a lot of poetry, for example, in comedy. And I wondered whether, because obviously, like I said, I've just done one with Phil Jupitus, who was a poet as well before he started, and obviously he still does poetry at a certain level as well. Do you think poetry can be funny, or do you think there's just an element of it that's in the sort of timing of it and the cadence? And
I mean, poetry can be funny, obviously, especially if you're hitting big rhymes, but I don't think it needs to be. And the poetry I do a couple of funny ones, but I do, when I'm on stage, if I'm doing a one-man show, I'll probably do 3 or 4 poems that are not even aimed to be funny. But I think that, certainly with my audience, I'm there delivering words which are mostly aiming for laughs, but actually, so the people are interested in the words I'm saying, and it's strange how it seems to fit quite well. People really quite like it when I do 5 minutes with no laughs, but there's a couple of good puns, not always by me. I do 5 or 6 poems by other authors. And like when I did Hamlet, in a way, there was a kind of humour in that too. I like poetry, and I find that if you recite it well and it's a good poem, audiences do. The sort of audiences that have come to be made laugh will also enjoy a poem.
I suppose you attract like attracts like, so whatever you do is going to attract a certain element of people that want to do that.
Yeah, I suppose if you're if you're doing a show about how you're a flat earther, you're going to get a lot of people in the audience who are flat earthers, I suppose.
I had that with Buddhism and cats. I had a lot of Buddhists come down.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in
Are
the
you a
early
Buddhist?
I read it more than anything else.
Yeah, no, but I always think of all the religions, that seems to be one, if I were to be religious.
Yeah,
same.
Yeah. But it's not, I don't really identify with it because I don't do enough with it. I like reading about it and I learn a lot more from it than I do than any others. But I had a lot of Buddhists come to the early shows and sort of, I wouldn't say fact check, but sort of say, oh, that's not right or that's a bit wrong. And I'd go, yeah, I've done that because it's funny if I'm getting it, or I'm meant to be funny if I'm getting it wrong. I'm misunderstanding the thing.
Have you ever done it? Did you ever do it in front of only Buddhists?
In Brighton one time, most of the room were Buddhists, like they did like an outing, I think.
And did they enjoy it?
Yeah, it was really, because by that point, because Brighton's like
Buddhism doesn't exclude laughter, does it?
No, not at all. If anything, they're probably the ones that are more likely to laugh.
I mean, I've always been interested by the fact that laughter and religion never really seem to go together very well. There's no gags in the Bible to speak, or there's one pun, I understand. But
well, there's, do you know Ravi Holy?
No.
He's a legit. He is a priest in real life,
yeah,
and he does stand-up comedy, and has been incorporating more of his stand-up set into his sermons and things. So right. I suppose he's doing his bit there, moving it across.
Yeah, well, good on him. Yeah, I think if it's going to be a good religion, there should be a bit of laughter in it, because laughter is the one true metaphysical consolation.
Yeah,
as Anthea Turner said.
And I'm just, it sounds like you've been merging these genres for most of your career.
Yeah. And like for art, I did a whole art thing in Edinburgh for a couple of years. In fact, if you look behind you, you can see one of my works. There's a series, anyway, I won't bother to, you can describe it if you want later, but yeah, so, I like to, try something a bit different. So that was an interesting idea, doing a whole art exhibition, because I was intrigued by the idea that you never really hear laughter in an art gallery. Mm. And, laughter and arts often seem not to go together. But I kind of hung out a bit with some of the Brit arts type guys in the 80s and 90s. And I recognised they all really admired comedians. And I always think they were secretly slightly frustrated comedians, a lot of it. Because if you look at a lot of the art, it's kind of funny in a way, some of it. Mm. I mean, the Tracy him in bed, for example. It's kind of an amusing idea as much as anything. Mm. But really, I'm a Dadaist.
Well, I think comedy, the beauty of it is it can be anything, as long as it's entertaining / funny.
Yeah.
Because I think obviously we all are going for laughs, ideally, but I think there's a certain element of storytelling in it that is entertaining rather than funny, and it helps build the world that means the jokes work better because you're giving it context. Yeah. So I suppose if someone comes to see you and they hear you do a few poems, they get an idea of who you are a bit more, so they sort of get into your head a bit more, and so when you tell the joke, they go, oh, I see where's world.
Yeah, and in some way that, comedians should share a bit of themselves rather than just stand there and recite one-liners in a way. I think I prefer it if you get a sense of who the person is.
How much are you on stage then, and how much are you...
Quite a lot, really.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm more declamatory on stage, obviously. But I am, these days, I'm pretty much me. I think I'm not that, I'm similar off to on, probably, although I'm a bit kind of quieter off, obviously. I mean, it's such a strange thing when you think about it, laughter and stand-up comedy. I'm being paid to stand in front of lots of people and make them make this funny sound that they do involuntarily, like farting or belching, but you never go to a club to get someone to make you belch, do you? Well, there's one somewhere, but
it's probably a weird kink thing there.
Yeah. Well, there's a farting, Lepetto man, you must have heard of him, and there is Mr. Methane, is the farting.
Oh, I know Mr. Methane. Yeah.
And I read recently there is the world farting contest somewhere in Sweden or somewhere every year.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't know that.
Entertaining farting.
I mean, is it all farting entertaining? I mean, like...
Well, it is sadly, really, isn't it? I mean, what is funny, if Donald Trump did a big fart while he was proclaiming some bullshit, it would be the funniest thing in the world, wouldn't it? Really? It's sad to say, you could construct eloquent phrases, mellifluous turns of language, but really, a big fart is always liable to beat it.
Yeah. So if you make a joke on stage... Do you you're standing by everything you say on stage, essentially, because a lot of comedians go with the defense of, I was on stage, or it was a joke. I suppose everything, and especially as you write so specifically, because your words are so...
Well, I mean, for example, I do a joke sometimes when I do my Radio 4 thing, and I say, you know that Jenny Murray who presents Woman's Out? It's not like you think Radio 4. She sells crystal meth around the back of Broadcasting House. Right, which is a joke, obviously. So I don't stand by that in the sense that I'm not really saying Jenny Murray does that. And, there's always going to be some element of your comedy that's exaggeration, or, it's so ridiculous that it's... I think Albert Camus said, the realisation that life is absurd should not be an end, but a beginning. And that's sort of my mantra on the world at large. Now look, I can hear something strange outside.
Alien?
Could be.
Could be.
Hang on, what's that thing there?
That's your own art, mate. That's your eyes.
No, but it seems to be moving. And look, hang on. Jesus. Sorry. Look, I think we're going to have to finish, Sonny. I quite like the look of this, Where are you going? All right. Well, look, I'm sorry, Simon. I'm heading off for the Alien. Do you want to come? Or?
Oh, I would actually, but have they got a friend?
Oh, there's 6 of them. Look.
Oh, I'll have 5.
Yeah,
you can have the one you like.
Yeah, look, and they've got that funny little machine out there. Right.
Okay, before we go, the Ask the Industry podcast is a Fruit That Got in Gravity's Way production for the internet. Please remember to subscribe, rate and donate if you can. All of those things help. Also, if you want to tweet Arthur or myself to thank us, we might not be in the universe at this point, but if you'd like to tweet either myself or Arthur to thank us for doing this interview, our links will be in the show notes. Thank you very much for all your help.
Come on then, let's leave the podcast. This might be your last ever one.
Ending on a high.
Yeah, well, who knows? Off to outer space. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Arthur Smith. You're meant to say, all right.
Thank you, Arthur Smith. Thank you, aliens. Bye-bye.